Just for a second, imagine what you think of as a key theme of the Bible. I don't know what goes through your head when you think of a key without which nothing of the Bible. I'm going to get right to it because what I'm going to talk about is what is a key theme of the Bible. Does anyone here find it a bit of a surprise that prisons are mentioned 200 times in the Bible? Go home or do it during the parade. Get your Bible out while the parade's going by and count. There are 73 mentions of prisoners in the Bible. You know, and we, before 1988 in the United Church of Canada, we were beholden to stand on you-know-what based on one verse in the Bible. And this is 200 mentions of prisons, 73 mentions of prisoners. There's only one mention in the Bible of prisons being a sanction for wrongdoing. Now, I don't know if you want to teach this at law school, but we're not at law school. We are here in church as children of God, and I think we need to listen to this stuff because Wendy asked me this just a minute ago. When did you get involved in prisons? And I got involved in prisons because Beth Dolaga sent me to the Philippines, and they had organized visits to the prisons there, where I found out people wear T-shirts in prison that say political prisoner. And me being from North America, aren't you going to get in a little bit of trouble with that? The warden allows it. This is not a big secret in the Philippines. Well, anyway, I had to deal with my primal reaction to being around people who are designated and paying the price because they are criminals, convicted criminals, even if they have political prisoner on their T-shirt. There's something primal within ourselves that you can talk about as a head issue about this, unless you yourself or me are caught up in it. My sister-in-law woke up one morning in her, I think, 13th floor condo in Abbotsford, and there were two men who she did not know in her condo. Then her condo door is triple locked, and they got all the security downstairs. Talk about primal. That was 15 years ago. My sister-in-law is still dealing with it. Well, I turned to the Bible to make sense of all of this. Do you know that the Bible goes through a huge evolution? A huge evolution in sanction. Eye for an eye. Or, has anyone ever heard this one? Let ye who is without sin cast the first stone. And I know which side we all think we're on between eye for an eye and let ye who is without sin. Can you imagine going in front of a judge and that's my defense in front of the judge, saying to the judge, let you who is without sin cast the first stone. Now, all of us think, because we're here in church, that we are the ones who would believe that and practice that. But just let someone cut you off in traffic, and you're going to be tossing stones as I did this morning when I couldn't make it down the Ladner Trunk Road. Here it is. This is what I believe is part of the evolution, especially if we be biblical people. I'm just going to ask for a show of hands on this one, just to try to center myself. Who here has ever heard of restorative justice as a program? Thank the Lord. You have just shortened this sermon by an hour. Here it is, the great themes of the Bible. God. I'm going to practice being that righteous person that Sandy read about. It's going to be hard to believe, but I'm going to be that righteous person. I've done all the good things. I visited the prisons in the Philippines. I visited in here, And here I am, this good person. I said to God, Lord, when did I see you thirsty and give you something to drink? When did I see you as a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did I see you sick or in prison? Click off, that's one of the 200, and go and visit you. I mean, I know I did that for others. I'm a good United Church person, where I went to youth group in the United Church. We're supposed to do that sort of thing. But when did I do that to you? And the king will reply, because there is the dot connecting missing. Truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. I did good because I'm a United Church person, but I did not connect the dots. I had done good with an eye for restoration, but I did not realize I was restoring my relationship to Jesus. That's part of it if you come into a church. The short course in a major theme of the Bible, prisons. I'm not going to ask here if anybody here has been the victim of a crime, because if you think back on that, you know that it gets in touch with the part of your brain that's sort of down here in the back, fight or flight. And we've had 4 great episodes, I think. I'm kind of simplifying it here. There's a spelling mistake that I passed on in your handout here. It's not vengeance, it's vengeance. The 4 great approaches to how we deal with wrongdoing when it's us who believes that the other person has done the wrongdoing. And I'm just going to shorten this. Vengeance, that's where an eye for an eye comes up, but there's some justice in that. You don't take 2 eyes. That would be unjust. So you can hear that the justice in there. But the second one is punishment. Don't these people deserve punishment? Well, should we get Sandy to read that again? The third one is where we are now, is corrections. Anybody ever heard that applied to how we deal with what we call wrongdoers? Anybody heard corrections, Canada Corrections, and all of that? It's all those 3 things moving towards what, including our MP, our newly elected MP, I found out last night, Gordie Hogue, he was a warden at a youth center, and he was the one that introduced restorative justice to his youth institution. And now he's off to Ottawa being one of the Trudeau Liberals in favor of pipelines, but we won't get into that. And I'm going to move straight to the end. I haven't even talked about wrongful convictions, where that muddies that water, or political prisoners that Beth and I have been involved with. Vengeance, punishment, corrections, and these days, gathering some steam, restorative justice, which amongst other things brings those who've been done unto back into the equation. When it was punishment, it was the state doing the punishment, taking it out of the hands of the victims. Even corrections, we mass incarcerate people. And the victims, really they give a victim impact statement, but are usually nowhere to be seen. There's so many directions to go on this. I'd like to just make one more advertisement about this, Beth. I'm part of a group who did raise $50,000 so that the Philippine National Council of Churches can give political prisoners some financial support for bail, lawyers. The lawyers have to be paid because this is not popular in the Philippines to be involved, or have travel for family, even photocopying. You know, how if you're a peasant, how do you raise for photocopying to make sure documents get into the court? We raised $50,000, currently held by the United Church Foundation in Toronto, because twice I visited prisons in the Philippines. and met inmates wearing political prisoner t-shirts. It was not even subtle. But that's not the direction I want to go in today. These are the headlines about prisons. I challenge you to go through a day listening to media in Canada and not hear something about prisons. These are the things that I've heard just recently. One was, American courts sentence African Americans to prisons 3 times more than whites for the same crime. 3 times more. Canadian courts sentence Aboriginals to prisons 10 times more than whites for the same crime. That's the headline. You want me to read the article? Edmonton's mega jail is 5 years old. Building it was not a good idea. Or solitary confinement, a punishment without a purpose. Those are the headlines that, once I've gotten into this, I just can't help but see these in the headlines. Last week, I did a wedding at the Fraser Valley Institution for Women in Abbotsford. I used the Ladner United's marriage register. Why do you think I'm preaching this Sunday? Jim Short said, if you're going to use my register, you're going to preach on the 27th. So he lent me the register, and here I am. This was the conversation after the wedding in the chapel in the Fraser Valley Institution. I don't know if this is true or not. There's a lot of things said in prison, but it was Corrections Canada, and very little of what I run into, is an agenda of correction. Listen to this. This is what the bride said. I said, "Where was your dog?" Because she raises rescue dogs, or dogs that have been rescued. And she raises them so they can have a life in a home somewhere else. But she said, well, I was told I could bring my guitar or I could bring my little dog Ruckus. And I thought to myself, what? How does that speak to corrections? That's sort of an internal agenda of some sort of punitive, completely unconnected with the original crime she was supposed to have committed. They said she couldn't have both. She was lucky to have the choice. The bride almost missed the wedding, I found this out. She'd been trying to help another illiterate prisoner in a dispute with a guard. Prison policy is that the internal, informal dispute resolution policy be followed first. She, as the advocate for the illiterate prisoner, the bride, she insisted that on the illiterate prisoner's behalf, that it go to the formal, external dispute resolution process, to take it out of the hands of the very people who were involved. The bride, the literate one, the advocate, she was threatened with solitary confinement. I don't know if that's true, it's a story. But for insisting that the informal dispute resolution process be replaced by a formal one, she is threatened with solitary confinement? That's not vengeance for the original act that got her there. That's not punishment for the original act. It's certainly not corrections, and it's not restorative. Now, there are so many directions I can go on this, but one, you will not hear me, and if you've heard me imply this, I immediately retract it. I'm not blaming guards or prison staff, because the mass incarceration forces this kind of, well, if I give you that, somebody else is going to ask for it. Or if I show you something that looks like favor, someone else will say, that's the agenda that goes on inside. When there's a concentrated incarceration, it just brings out issues that, I don't know, that just seem so unconnected with what should be having been going on. Guards, I find, both in the Philippines and in Canada, are kind of caught in a vice. Because what they fear, I think, is the headline. They fear that, the thing taken out of context. That woman got to bring a guitar to her wedding inside. She was lucky. I mean, this is the headline. It's kind of a long headline. She's lucky to be able to get a wedding. And, that's the back here talking. And guards fear that. Because once that gets out into the wild, into the public, they know their lives are going to get kind of complicated. We revert to vengeance. We put guards and the administration in an untenable situation because they fear the headline. And here we are as Christians, when we read our source document, the Bible, we look at it, I hope. When did we see you sick or in prison and go to visit you? I mean, I did that. But did I see Jesus there? And this is in the Bible. And I've been ordained since 82. What's the math on that? It's a lot. And I've been retired for 4 years. Maybe I've forgotten that when we were sitting around the table in the chapel at the prison, I didn't see Jesus there. That's why Jim Short wants me to go back to seminary to learn that again. And this is the end. This is the end of this sermon, because you know what restorative justice is. I don't need to go on for the next hour. I've been appointed by the General Council of the United Church to a national organization called the Church Council for Justice and Corrections. The Baptist Church, the Anglican Church, Canadian Council of Catholic Bishops, Presbyterian, Evangelical Lutheran Church, Christian Reformed Church, Quakers, Mennonite Central Committee. Did I mention the Anglicans? Okay, no more Anglicans. And the United Church of Canada each send a rep to this independent entity, to their governing board. Melanie Younger, our executive director, with an office at St. Paul University in Ottawa. And just last night I found out our local MP, Liberal MP Gordie Hogue, has this as his background. So when I go out to Ottawa, I will be visiting him. Our task, your task, because we are involved in this as the United Church, is to move policymakers and our churches away from vengeance, which is tough, especially if you've been done unto, especially if you're the one cut off in traffic and you're supposed to all of a sudden fight the urge that emanates from the base of the brain. You're supposed to move from vengeance away from punishment. I don't know if that works. Through this concentrated mass of people called corrections to restorative justice, which if it does nothing else, it brings those who have been done unto back into the equation, as tough as that is. And that's where you need the corporate community to help people through what can only be a painful process of restoration. What I'd ask you to do, this is what I'm going to ask you to do, and you don't have to do it this month, you don't have to do it in the summer. Spend a day in prison. Spend 2 years less a day in prison. Get a job there. We had a prison guard at Sunnyside United who worked at the Ocala jail. And he said at the end of every shift, he worked there 15 years, I think. He said at the end of every shift, it always surprised him who stayed and who got to go home. Because the peacemakers were half and half. Peacemakers were some guards, some inmates. The troublemakers were some guards, some inmates. And he said it always kind of baffled him that, right, he gets to go home and watch TV. He gets to go back to his cell. Anyway, spend a day in prison. That's really the antidote to what goes on at the base of the brain. Have Sandy come and read you that passage again to remind you of who it is you're finding when you visit. You've got a date. okay? You've got a date. The vision of restorative justice is to connect dots of a broken relationship, a broken world, sometimes something that even separates us from Jesus Christ, whom we are supposed to see when we visit. Amen.